Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again for attending our weekly Wednesday workshop. And as usual, we have our typical disclaimer up. Some of you guys are asking if this webinar is going to be recorded, and yes, it is. And we post all our webinars after the recording, a couple days afterwards, to our sharkindicators.com/webinars section. And you can find basically every webinar that we've done since the inception of this product. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the torch off to Zach, who's got a bit of a poll here today. Again, today's going to be a kind of a beginner session, and it's always kind of good to go back to basics and just learn the ins and outs of BloodHound without all the advanced features. So again, what we're going to show here today is just the basics. So here I'm going to pass it over to Zach.
Hey, welcome everybody. Let me just get myself situated here. Get my screen going. Alright, so I have a poll for you guys today, just to kind of like to get an idea of what kind of experienced individuals we have in the webinar, just to kind of understand, how fast I can go, or how much time I should take to explain everything in detail. So it's kind of helps guide me on explaining things. So I'll just give you guys a minute to answer the poll there. And Thomas was asking about the recorded webinars, which Jeremy answered, and I'm going to show you that on the website as soon as we're done with the poll. So, all right. So it looks like most of you have at least a little experience with BloodHound. So, all right. This is a good webinar then for you guys. So last week's webinar, we started going back to the basics, and so last week's webinar, I started just kind of going over some common concepts amongst all the solvers for BloodHound. So let me, all right, let me close the poll here. And share that with you guys real quick. All right, let me turn that off. And I think you guys should be able to see my screen now, hopefully. So, yeah, so back to Thomas's question on the webinars. So if you go to support, and then there's Learn BloodHound, or you can go to BloodHound, you can go to Learn BloodHound, and then here's the webinar. So you can click on the webinars, it'll bring this page up, and you can see all the recorded webinars are up here. And we haven't posted last week's webinar up there yet. We're a little late on doing that. So last week's webinar was going back to the basics, and today's webinar is just a continuation of that. All right. So let me start with the basics. I'm going to take BloodHound off the chart. All right. So to add BloodHound is an indicator. All right. So you add it to the chart just like any indicator. All right. So it's under SI BloodHound. So I'll double click on it, add it to the chart, and so the first thing that you want to do is you want to give your template a name. You can see right up here it says unnamed, and when you click in this field, you'll see this button appears. All right, so if I click off of that, you see the button's gone. And as soon as I click in this box here, the button shows back up. So click the button, and this opens up what we call real-time mode. And real-time mode allows you to add a chart or a secondary time period, and it also allows you to load up saved template files that you may have. Right? So every time you create a system, you can save it, and it'll show up in this list here of all your systems. So let me scroll down, and I need to pick a name. All right. And typically, for most of our workshops, we do upload the BloodHound template file and typically the chart file as well. So what I did is I loaded a template from here, and I want to name it. I want to rename this because I want to give it today's date. You can see I have a little naming scheme, so all the training workshops I put the date that they belong to, or the date they were done on. As you can see, I loaded up, what I did is I loaded a blank training workshop, put it up here, and you can see you can hear me typing. Nothing's typing up here. What I have to do is I can hit the change button, and that will allow me to essentially do a save as, and that will allow me to change that name. So just going to scroll down here. Oh, let me sort by name. And I'm just going to pick that one again and put today's date on there. So 12, 08, 02, no, it's 01. That's right. It's the 1st today. Yep. All right, now save it. And then you'll see it changes the name up here. All right. So let me go back to the chart button here. So this chart button, if I click on it, you can see it allows me to add a secondary time period. All right, so I could add a 15-minute chart to the system, and then I could put solvers on that 15-minute chart. You can select all of NinjaTrader's bar types here. You can even select some custom ones. There are some custom bar types that do work, and some that won't. Ones that we know do not work are like custom line break charts. Right? So if I add this custom line break, it doesn't work because you can see that there's only one. It only has one field here. We're working on getting this to work. Some of the custom ones will work, so something like the Renko, the better Renko, because the better Renko only requires this one input parameter. So, but all the NinjaTrader's built-in bar types do work. So if I go to NinjaTrader's, if I use their line break chart, you can see now here's all the fields that are required for that bar type do show up. So it does work. All right, so let me just kind of go back to just plain old 15-minute, or I'll do a 5 minute. That's, yeah, I'm using my default time frame is what the chart is, right? So my chart is using a 10 range. So that's what the default time frame is going to be. And then my secondary time frame would be this 5-minute chart. All right, so in this real-time mode window, essentially, you know, the two key things that you want to accomplish with this window is, you know, either to load up an existing template that you may have, or, you know, or just create yourself a new one. And you can use the change button to create a new name here, and then add a secondary time period if your system calls for it. All right, then I can hit OK. You'll see up here, you know, the name of the template appears. So, Some other settings that we have are what we call the racing stripes, jokingly, and that's what paints the whole chart, right? So the racing stripes is the shaded background that covers the whole chart when one of your BloodHound signals appears. You can even BloodHound can even play a sound when a signal occurs for you, and then some other commonly used features is the threshold value. So I'll kind of get into this a little later. It helps to kind of have BloodHound on the chart so I can explain what the threshold value, what it does. Usually I set it to 0.9. It really depends on the system. So, but this threshold value is a part of the fuzzy logic that BloodHound has built into it. So I'll explain this a little later. And then everything else down here is just standard NinjaTrader parameters. All right, so hit OK, and that'll add BloodHound to the chart. And now you'll see a button appears up on the chart. A button and a pull-down window. All right, so if we click on the button, that brings us into what we call real-time mode. And it's called real-time mode because as soon as you add a solver to the chart, you can see BloodHound starts to update in real time, instantly. Right, where normally, remember in the indicator window, normally you add an indicator and you'd have to hit apply, and if you change the setting, you would have to hit the apply button. But with this real-time window, you can make any changes you want, and the updates change in real time. Okay, so just to give you an example, I could change the output here, and you can see that the chart is updated in real time. So that's the differences between those two windows. So, so once again, so you can see in this real-time window, there's no chart button here, right? So if I wanted to change this 5-minute to a different time frame, I would have to exit out of real-time mode and go back into the indicator window. So I can right-click, go back into the indicator window, and then select BloodHound. And then remember, this button up here brings us into setup mode. And there's the chart button. And from there, I can edit the secondary time frame. So I'm going to close that up, go back into real-time mode, and there we go. All right, so just to kind of go over what I covered last week. So last week I covered the output sections. You can see that every solver has an output section, and I also covered this parameter section, which most solvers have. Usually the name in here are different. They're different to match what the solver is doing. Since this is the slope, these settings in here refer to the slope. Other solvers, like the comparison, kind of have the same section, but it's called difference. You have a large amount and small amount. All right, so those are kind of the main key fields that are most widely used amongst all the solvers, and that's what we covered last week. And we'll get that posted up there as soon as we can. And so today I'm going to cover just a few more common fields here that are used, and then I'll go into and then with time permitting, I'll go into just kind of a quick summary of what each solver does and kind of how to use it. So, and from time to time, I'm going to try and keep an eye on the questions. So we do give questions a higher precedence, because really these workshops, obviously they're for you, and we'd like to address your questions first. So if you have questions, please pop them in there, and I'll get to them. And if I overlook them, then Jeremy will pipe up and remind me that there's questions in there. So Ken has a question: can alerts be tied to Market Analyzer in NT? Can alerts be the Market Analyzer has its own alerts. So like the alerts on the chart can't be linked to the Market Analyzer, right? They're two separate two separate entities, two separate products in NinjaTrader, and NinjaTrader doesn't link the two together. So I think the answer to your question is no, the way I understand it. So your follow-up question here, and can alert messages be sent to text on mobile? Not yet, Ken. We'll get there. We will probably add that as a feature, but before we get there, that would most likely be a part of another product that we have that we're working on called Falcon, which is a very powerful powerful automated trading system. So right now we have SI Raven as an interim, so at least you can start with some automated trading system using Raven. But Falcon is going to be the full-fledged product. It's going to be fully integrated with BloodHound, just like Raven is, but Falcon is far more powerful. Its stopping strategy and exit strategies are probably what we believe is going to be the most powerful on the market yet. So sending text messages, that's something that we could build into Falcon. So, but remember, BloodHound is an indicator. So BloodHound doesn't actually manage the trades. Strategies manage your trades. And so SI Raven strategy that complements BloodHound, right? So you would want the strategy to send your text messages to your phone or emails or something like that. So let's see. All right, JJ has a question. Solver indicator can be linked to Market Analyzer. I'm not quite sure what you're asking there, JJ. Can the solver... Jeremy is working on getting the Market Analyzer to work properly with BloodHound. Well, let me back up. So right now, BloodHound works with the Market Analyzer when there's only one instrument in the Market Analyzer. For some reason, when there's multiple instruments on your Market Analyzer, which really what the Market Analyzer is for, having multiple instruments on it is causing issues with BloodHound. So when we have that all working, BloodHound will be able to give you signals in the Market Analyzer. I guess with the Market Analyzer, right, you can change the color of the cells, and I'm not terribly familiar with the Market Analyzer. I haven't used a whole lot, but whatever kind of signals the Market Analyzer will give you, you can take your BloodHound and you can take your template, right, and load that into the Market Analyzer, and have the market analyzer give you whatever kind of signals you're looking for. All right, so let's see. Edward has a question. Slope period 1 means how many ticks or direction? Slope period 1. Slope period. Let's see. Edward, if I'm understanding your question right, you're asking about how many ticks or direction. The maximum slope and minimum slope we covered this in the last week's webinar, but let me just go over this real quickly. So this kind of sets constraints as to the minimum slope that you're looking for, or the maximum slope that you're looking for, to get an output from the individual solver. So let me add a slope indicator on here. Okay, so we have the slope indicator on there, and let me bring up BloodHound here, and I like to name my solvers so I know what indicator they're looking at. All right, so what this minimum slope does is, now if you look in the output field, you can see that you have 4 different settings in this output field. All right, so we have less than minimum and at minimum. So these 2 fields, right, are referring to the minimum slope here. And then the at max or greater than max is referring to this field here, the maximum slope. So if I set this maximum slope to say 0.1 ticks, let me set it to something a little higher so you can see what's going on the chart here. Oops, let's try 0.2. Let me go up to 0.5. Okay, there, 0.5 kind of illustrates. We can see here this whole area. You can see how the output is lower than the rest of the output here. You can see that the racing stripes aren't showing up. And so what BloodHound's looking for is it's looking for the slope of the indicator to be greater than 0.5 to give you a value of 1 on the output here. And then when it does that, then that's when it shades the background. All right, so let me put this back to 0 to illustrate. All right, so now you can see BloodHound essentially is painting the background on every bar, except when the slope is flat. So you can see through here, you can see this looks pretty flat, and on some of these bars it is flat. And here, actually, let me change the period. That will give a better demonstration. Let me go up to 50. With those low periods, you get a lot of flat spots, and it's kind of hard to illustrate what's going on. Okay. Now I need to change the period in BloodHound to match what's on the chart. Okay. This is a little easier to visualize here. All right, so we can see that, as the indicators point up, BloodHound's giving us a long output, and when the indicator slope is down, right, BloodHound gives us a short output. Now, if I put in this 0.5 ticks of slope, now you can see. Now this makes a little more sense. So you can see when this moving average is a little flat up here, that you can see the output of BloodHound starts to diminish as the slope of the indicator starts to flatten out. You can see that the value that BloodHound gives you goes lower and lower down to 0. Right, so that's what this minimum and maximum slope does, is it kind of allows you to set requirements for your slope or whatever other solver you may be using. Right? So all right, just kind of going through the questions here. I see Jeremy's answering most of them for you guys. All right, so Thomas is asking, will Raven cost extra? No, Thomas. Raven is kind of like the interim to Falcon, which comes with BloodHound. So if you go into the strategies, and you'll see there's Raven. Raven is comes with BloodHound as an interim, as a freebie, just so you can test your systems, in a simple automated trading. So we did do a full webinar dedicated to Raven, to SI Raven, and I'm just looking. Let's see, yeah. So let me pull the website up. So the latest webinar that's up there, this automated trading workshop, this one is dedicated to SI Raven to show you how to use it. All right. Well, let's see. Thompson's got a lot of good questions. We like questions. Yes, Thomas. The license for BloodHound is a lifetime license. All right. So when you purchase BloodHound, you own it for life, and you get all the upgrades. Yeah, that's right. Except for version. So it's a lifetime license for version 1, and then when version 2 comes out, which we don't have any idea when version 2 is come out, but it's probably off a good year or so. There'll be just a minor upgrade fee. And let's see, Xavier. Hey, Xavier, welcome. All right, so Xavier is asking, could the output of the solver be used to filter out sideways market movement? All right. Yeah, Xavier, that's a good question here. Let me try and save that for the end of this webinar. That way I can cover some of today's topics. And also, just to let you guys know, there is a previous workshop where we did cover that topic, where we're trying to identify sideways markets, and let's see, I believe it is this workshop here, finding congestion. Yes, strength, market direction. Yeah, I believe it's the finding congestion, where this one's dedicated to a couple of different ways to try and find a flat or a sideways range-bound kind of market. I think, if I remember correctly, I think in that webinar we used like the Bollinger Bands, and I think we used the ADX, and probably I think a moving average or something like that. All right, Randy, Jeremy, have you considered for possible long-term goal the potential of BloodHound auto-importing all loaded indicators that can be unchecked if desired? It would save time loading indicators into BloodHound with parameters. Yeah, you know, Randy, that is kind of a long-term goal that we'd like to achieve. That would be something great where if you already had indicators on your chart and then you load BloodHound, and then you could, you know, a great idea is, right, you could pick a solver that you want, click Add, click on the solver, and then click on the indicator on the chart instead of having to, you know, go through this. Although you got to admit, it doesn't take too much. It doesn't take too long to go through and pick out your indicator here and set your period. But it would be kind of neat to be able to just select your indicators on the chart. You know, one thing we can't do is, you know, you would still have to pick what solver you're using with which indicator, right? Because, you know, all indicators use solvers, except there's a couple of specialty solvers in there that are dedicated to, like, you know, the Dorsian swing volatility. You know, it's dedicated to the SI swing indicator. So there is no indicator to pick here because this solver is dedicated to the SI swing indicator. But, you know, as far as all the rest, you know, you still have to tell BloodHound what solver to use for which indicator. So. And yeah, you know, we've had that suggestion from quite a few customers, so it's definitely on the drawing board. And all right, so here I'm just reading Randy's last question here. Yeah, that's another good way of doing it, Randy. So thanks for those suggestions. All right, Thomas has another question here. Am I able to put different chart markers on the chart through BloodHound, like arrows, pointers, etc.? Thomas, probably fairly soon we'll get around to that. That's a very commonly requested feature for BloodHound, is being able to put markers on the chart along with, you know, painting the background as well. That way, you know, when we get around to adding markers to the chart, that it'll be a little more complex than just adding a marker. So you would be able to put a marker up on the chart, you know, based on different signals that you may have. So you may, so in the logic, when you get around to using the logic tab, you know, you may have different signals coming into different logic nodes, and So we may set it up so that a logic node could put a chart marker up. That way different logic modes could put up different chart markers. That way you could know which signal is painting the background. Those are just some things that we're thinking about. So, yeah, adding chart markers is very commonly asked, so that should be coming up soon. All right. Okay, so it looks like I got through the questions here. So, yeah, those are good questions. We get asked those quite a bit. So, and the more people ask for something, the higher priority we give it. So. All right, so I'm going to jump back to today's topic. All right, so as I was saying before, last week we kind of covered the output. We covered this, this parameter section for the min and max slope. So this parameter section is kind of the same as this difference section here, where you have a large amount, small amount. And these large amount, small amount refers to, these output sections here. So you got small amount and large amount, small amount and large amount. So that's what we covered last week. So this week I just have a few more common parameters here to go over, and then we'll do some simple examples or go over some questions that you guys have. So all right, so I'm going to start from the top and kind of work my way down here. So one thing to use is this name. So when you add a solver on here, what I typically do is I like to put the indicator name in there, so I know what indicator I'm actually analyzing with this solver. And some of these more complex solvers, something like, let's see here, let me look at the threshold. This threshold, yeah, threshold and this comparison, allows you to get kind of complicated or build some complex conditions into them. And so sometimes I'll put more than just the indicator name on here, because like this this comparison solver, right? You're comparing two pieces of data, right? You're comparing indicator A to indicator P. So depending on what we're doing here, usually I'll put both indicator names, and I'll try and give a very short description of what type of comparison I'm doing. So, all right. So now the behavior section. Well, actually, let me just drop down. So the symbol, this doesn't do anything right now. This is reserved for Falcon. So this is something that is going to be used in Falcon later on. Let's see, the color. Yeah, actually, this is a good one here. So if I have, let me get a good example here of how to use the color of plot. So I'm going to take this indicator comparison and price. Let's see, price to EMA 100. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the price. Let me turn the other solvers off. I'm going to compare the price to the EMA 100 Actually, I'm going to knock it down to the 50. That way, we'll get some more. That way, BloodHound will kind of vary its output a little more often. All right, so sorry, I changed the wrong solver. Let me put this back on the SMA. SMA 50. And so this is the one I want to change. All right, so we got closing price, and this one I want to change to the EMA 50. All right. And then what I can do, you can see that this is up on the default time frame. Now I can move it down by clicking the down button, and it puts it on the 5-minute chart. So now I can see how price compares to the EMA 50 on the 5-minute chart. So when price is above the EMA 50 on the 5-minute chart, BloodHound's going to give us a long. And I can kind of use this as kind of like a filter, a trade direction filter. So, all right, so I can say that so if price is above the EMA 50 on the 5-minute chart, I only want to take longs. So I can use this as a filter. All right, so now I can turn both of these solvers on. And so now I can see, I'm going to squish the chart up a little bit. So now with these two solvers turned on, BloodHound's give me a signal when price is above the 50 EMA on the 5-minute chart, and the slope of the SMA 50 is greater than 0.5 ticks. And then that's when we get a signal to go along there. And we can see we finally got a signal to go short once the price on the 5-minute chart, once the price got below the 50 EMA. And, of course, the slope of this 50 SMA was greater than 0.5 ticks. Now, we have two solvers, and this is a very simple example here. Typically, most systems, you'll have about 10 solvers up here, right? So if you're trying to figure out, what out of 10 solvers, which solver is kind of firing my filter here. So out of all the, BloodHound's output, and out of all these solvers, if I wanted to know, what influence this filter solver here, this comparison solver, was giving to the system, what I can do is I can show this on the chart. I can show what output this solver is firing. What I can do is I'll change the color to white, and I'm going to go here and refresh the chart. And now we can see, you see this white line? So this white line, let me stretch this out now. Okay, so this white line is showing me that solver. It's showing me the output for that solver, for that one solver. So now, when I look at BloodHound's output I can see that with this solver being the filter, it's only going to allow me to take a long, right? Because I can see this white line is it's giving me an output of 1. So I can only take longs when this solver is up here, is giving me an output on the longs. And then we can see here it switches to the short side. So now this solver is giving me an output on the short side. So that way my system can only take a short trade when the solver is giving me a short output. And so this color plot helps me look at individual solvers and what they're doing. Right, and so I can see here. So as I'm looking through this, I could be wondering, why didn't I get a long on these couple of bars here? And I can see that the solver on the 5-minute chart for these 2 bars, it only permitted a short for those 2 bars because price was below the 50 EMA on the 5-minute chart. And the same with this section here. So that's what this color does. Allows you to kind of look at individual solvers and see what they're doing, and it helps you debug your system and kind of helps you understand why you may not be getting a signal on certain bars when you think you should be getting a signal. All right. So, like here on this bar, even though this slope looks pretty steep, there was no long output here, and we can see that just for that one bar, it just dipped below the 50 EMA, and so it only permitted a short, and that's why we didn't get any signal there. All right, so now, that covers the display section. So now let's go over the behavior section here. So enabled, we can see that if I remove the check mark, it changes the enabled. If I put the check mark in there, so enable, essentially enabled turns the solver on and off. Right? So if I set this to false, you can see BloodHound's output disappears. And if I turn it back on, BloodHound's output reappears. One thing to note is that when you're using a logic template, as soon as you start using a logic template, so right now you can see I don't have any logic templates defined. So the enable field works, but when you're using logic templates, all solvers are always on, and this field no longer works. It's no longer active. So the solvers are always on. I mean, you can go in and uncheck all your solvers, but it has no effect once you start using a logic template. Yeah. All right, now the evaluate. So the evaluate is pretty simple. You can evaluate both, which is both long and short, or you can set the solver to only evaluate longs or shorts. So, right, if I set it to longs only, you can see now that there's no short output. All right, so let me set this to transparent. There. Okay, so once again, let me put this evaluate to both. Right, so you can see we're getting some short outputs here. And all right, so now we got all these shorts, and of course if I put it to short only, you can see the longs disappear. So sometimes when you get some of these solvers doing complicated things, you know, like typically I've used the evaluate section. Most commonly I've used it with the support and resistance solver. That's where I've used it most. You know, so sometimes sometimes I'll use it with the comparison or the threshold, or actually probably the most second commonly used is the crossover. It's probably, yeah, the crossover is probably the most second commonly used solver with this. That way I can set up, I can be looking for crossover conditions and only evaluate, you know, the longs or the shorts. All right, now here's a fun one. The invert value. This can get really really crazy because it doesn't reverse the signals. It completely inverts the signals. And so let me give you. So let me set the solver back up to look at 0.5 ticks of slope. All right, so we can see that now we have some gaps here where there's no racing stripe in the background. Now if I invert this, look at BloodHound's output. So now you can see we both have some areas where there's a long and a short output on the same bar, both long and short on the same bar. So let me take off the invert. Right, so we can see on these two bars here, actually I'll set this even higher. All right, so let me mark this. All right, so I marked this area here where essentially there's no BloodHound output, and over here. Now, if I do invert value, we can see that now we have a long and a short output on the same bar. And same with this section over here, right? We have a short output and a long output. So that's a true invert. And we can see here that we have a long output when the slope of the indicator is sloping down. So if I set that back to false, right, we can see that we have a short output here, or a short signal, and there's no long signal, no long output. And if I invert it, right, and did a true invert, so now there's no short output, and it was inverted to a long output. So yeah, so just be cautious when you're using the invert, because it's not reversing your signals, it's inverting them. And typically areas usually where this gets kind of tricky is on bars where there's absolutely no output from BloodHound, and then you invert it and all of a sudden you have a long and a short output. So typically if you want to invert a solver's output, the best way to do that is to use these output sections to invert the value. Right, so right now we're using the indirection, So the output is in the same direction as the slope, right? So you can see the slope is down, and so the output is down or short. And you can see over here the slope of the SMA is up, and the output of the solver is up or long. So if you want to invert the solver, the best way to do it is to use the against direction. So let me put that in there. So now you can see we have a mirrored effect. The longs mirror the shorts. Now if I get rid of the indirection, now you can see the output has been reversed. So using the output section is the best way to reverse your signal, not the invert. So let me put this back to normal. Okay, and then the next section I want to cover is the displacement, is this displacement here. And let's see, the easiest way to illustrate that is let me use the bar direction solver. So the bar direction solver is pretty simple. When the bar is closed up, you get a long output. Right? So all of these bars were closing up, and you get a long output, and which shades the background. Right? So you get a green racing stripe for the long output, and then you get this one down bar, and you get a short output. So let me stretch this out, and then here you can see with these dojis, there's no output. All right, so the displacement, and that's right, this solver that's right, this solver doesn't have a displacement. Displacements are used with indicators. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a solver that will do the same thing as this bar direction. Right, so I can use, let me add another indicator comparison solver. And what I'm going to do is compare the closing price of the bar to the open, right? So the way the bar direction solver is working, is it simply compares the close to the open, right? And that's how you know what direction the bar is going. Simple enough. So we're comparing the closing price to the open price. So I'm going to set indicator B to the opening price, and the way I can do that is I had to use an indicator to get the opening price, and SI Chameleon was built for BloodHound just for that purpose. So we can see over here, SI Chameleon has the high price, the low price, the mid range of the price, the open, the close, the typical, the weighted, and the median of the price bar. So if you don't know what the typical, median, or weighted, or the mid, if you don't know what those values are, you can look in NinjaTrader's help section, and NinjaTrader gives the formula. So, because these values are actually calculated by NinjaTrader, and so in their help section, you can do a search for typical, and their help section gives the formula that they use to calculate these values. So, excuse me for a sec while I take a drink of water. Okay, so the reason why I'm using SI Chameleon is because I want to get the opening price. So I'm comparing the closing price to the opening price. And the reason why I had to use indicators, because if I look on types here, we have absolute value, closing price, volume, indicator, swings, and linear regression. So we don't have everything built into this. Closing price is what's most commonly used, so we included this one in there just to make it quick and simple. But for other prices of the bar, you're going to have to use this indicator and use SI Chameleon. So let me turn off the bar direction. And what I need to do is, if I look here on the chart, you see this doji right here, and this doji is giving me a long output when really the close and the open are equal. Same with this doji right here. Same with this doji right here. Right. So I'm going to do is I'm going to set this large amount by 1 tick, and then turn the small amount output off. So set it to 0. Set this one to 0. And there we go. Now the dojis don't have an output, just like the bar direction. Okay, so now we can see that when I'm using, now we can see I have this displacement. So, and actually to better illustrate this, I'm going to use an indicator, for indicator A, I'm going to use an indicator here. That way, now I have a displacement on both. And that'll help illustrate what I'm trying to show you here. So let's go back to Chameleon, and I want to use the closing price. Okay. All right, so we can see on the chart we're getting the same effect. Dojis are still absent or blank, and up bars are green, down bars are red. Okay, so now if I displace these indicators by 1, we can see that what it does is it takes the value of 1 bar back and displaces it forward by 1 bar. So now we can see this up bar here is now actually painted red. So it took the, so you can see this, these 4 bars back here, let me mark them. Right, so we have 4 bars that are down, but we can see that the 4 shorts got moved forward by 1 bar. So that's what the displacement is doing. All right, so I have all right, so we can see this arrow is displaced from this arrow by 1 bar. So what that is doing is it's kind of taking it's taking the output of the solver and pushing it forward by 1 bar. And if I displace it by 2, there we go. So what this is helpful for is, if you're looking for a condition, 5 bars back, you can displace it by 5 bars, and it takes that condition and moves it forward by 5 bars. So this is a way of kind of looking for conditions that happened, back historically and applying them to the current bar. And all right, so that kind of wraps up the basics of the interface for the solvers. So now I'm going to look at some questions, and from there I'll just kind of try and quickly cover the basics of each solver. So let me look at some questions here. All right. Yeah, Randy is making a comment about the color option. Yeah, this is a very handy feature when you're trying to debug stuff. All right, Randy's got another question here. So if I wanted output for 2 different SMAs being within, say, 5 ticks, I'm assuming 5 ticks of each other, I would want to use both in direction and against direction, right? Let me reread your question again. So if I wanted output for 2 different SMAs being within, say, 5 ticks, I think you're asking, to detect the proximity of 2 different SMAs, of say within 5 ticks. I think that's what you're probably asking. All right, thanks, Randy. All right, so we have a 50 SMA, and let me add another SMA here real quick. Just throw a 100 on there. All right, so let's look for this right here. Shrink my chart. All right, so next thing I need to do is, so if we're looking for 2 indicators to be within this proximity of each other, that would be a comparison, right? So I'm comparing, the white SMA to the red SMA, and I'm looking to see when they're within 5 ticks of each other. So that's a comparison, comparing 2 different indicators to each other. All right, so add well, I already have a comparison on here. So let me just say, sorry, it's SMA 50 to 100. And so it's a proximity. Let's say 5 tick proximity. All right, so let me change this. Typically, typically you want the fastest moving indicator in indicator A. Just if you're kind of wanting to know a place, how a starting place of which indicator should go in indicator A and what indicator should go in indicator B. Typically, you want the fastest moving indicator in indicator A. All right, we get the SMA set up in here. All right, 50. and a 100 period. Now, this is kind of a unique way of using the comparison, right? By default, usually you're looking for A being greater than B. That's kind of like the default setting here for longs, and then A being less than B for shorts. But we're looking for these two indicators to be within proximity of each other by 5 ticks. And it's always a good idea to have your large amount equal or larger than the small amount. Otherwise, you get weird results. So I'm going to make sure that the large amount equals the small amount. And since we're looking for, essentially, we're looking for indicator A to equal indicator B within 5 ticks. So we're going to use the neutral, A to B neutral. In other words, it's almost the same. Essentially, this is like A equals B within the small amount. So I'm going to set that to 1. Set this neutral to 1 for the shorts. Set that to 0. Now, because you're looking for two indicators to be within the same proximity of each other, you know, that's kind of a directionless type of comparison. So that's why I set the long and the short to both be 1. And we can see the output here is we have a long and a short output. So that way, so this comparison essentially is good for, it's good for longs and shorts, right? Because when two indicators are next to each other, it doesn't really tell you to go long or short. It just says they're in the proximity of each other. And then you would use other solvers to determine what direction to go. So you could use this slope solver here to determine whether you're going to go short or long. So if I turn this guy on, so if I turn the 50 SMA slope solver on, there you go, and we get a short signal. Right. So let me illustrate this again, so I can turn that off, and I can go to the slope solver here and turn that on. All right. So now we can see the output of the slope solver. Or probably, I mean, looking at the slope of the white line, which is the 50 SMA, I mean, that's pretty obvious. So you may not necessarily want to see what the slope solver is doing. You probably want to look at what the comparison solver is doing, because, you know, sometimes it's kind of hard to eyeball, you know, where in here is 5 ticks. You know, which one of these bars is 5 ticks. So we can most likely would want to turn this solver on, or set this solver to plot a color, and there we go. So now we can see when the white line, you know, heads up to 1 and down to -1 for the shorts. That tells us that solver has fired a signal. And so we can see on this bar is when they're within 5 ticks of each other. And then we just have to wait for our slope solver condition to be met. So the slope solver is looking for 1 tick of slope, which is a pretty steep slope. So there you go, Randy. All right. Now let's see what other kind of questions I have here. All right, so let's see. Ken has a question. Can NT linear regression be used as a trying to figure out what that word is, Ken. A timing indicator. I'm not sure what shoal stick is. Can NT-linear regression be used as shoal stick or timing indicator? Oh, stochastic. All right, thanks, Ken. Can a linear regression be used as a stochastic? Well, I'm not. I think I understand. Let me add the stochastic indicator on here, or I mean the linear regression. Are you? Let's see, linear regression. Are you looking? Are you thinking about looking at the slope of the linear regression? Because the slope of the linear regression kind of looks like a stochastic. It's always oscillating up and down. So let me add that on here. Let me make that plot line a little thicker. All right, yeah, so this kind of looks like a stochastic. So I think this is probably what you're asking. Can this be used? Can NT-linear regression be used as a stochastic? Well, I would say yes, kind of without knowing more detail of what you're kind of getting at. I would say yes. So let me put the add a stochastic on here as well, just to kind of give a comparison. Right, so when you're looking at the stochastic, essentially there's two key characteristics you can be looking at, right? You could be looking at the slope, which way is it pointed? It's the same thing with the linear regression. And also you can look at the threshold values, right? So you can look at when the stochastic is above 80 or below 20 or whatever you want, right? So you could do the same thing with the linear regression, right? We can look at the slope of it, or we can look at, when the slope is above a certain point. So let me kind of show this real quick. Getting close to running out of some time, so I'm just going to try and cruise through this pretty quickly. So let me add another slope solver here. Right, so this is going to be the linear regression slope. Now, let's put linear regression. All right, so simply looking at this, right, so just using the slope solver in its default settings, right, so we get a long output when the slope is up and a short when it's down. And then we could also look at thresholds, right, so we can try and look at when the slope is at a maximum or a minimum slope condition. set a threshold value in here. I'll just say 0.04. Okay, so there we go. So linear regression, looking at thresholds. So I set my threshold at 0.04 and negative 0.04. So all right. And all right, so let me see. Ken, looks like you're trying to clarify here. So looking at 230 time when both MA pointing up and looking at price to retrace back into and using linear regression for timing. Let's see. Okay, looking at 230. All right, so this is this bar here. So that's 230. The linear regression is already pointing up. And on 8-1. Must mean, let's see, mean 2:30 in AM? Maybe you're meaning AM. Oh, okay. So probably right about there, 2:30 AM. Yeah, okay. So we're looking at 2:30 AM when both MAs see, pointing up and looking at price to retrace back into and using linear regression for timing. Okay, I think I see what you're looking at. So we're probably looking, so if you're looking at the linear regression for timing, you're probably looking for something like a, oops, wrong arrow. Probably looking at something like looking for this bounce off of the moving average and looking for the linear regression to point up. It's kind of like your timing. So, okay, gotcha, Ken. All right. So we can look at a couple things. So, all right, so we already got this proximity going. And let's see. Let me turn off the threshold. All right, so I got the linear regression slope on. So you can see the slope is pointing up right here. And let's see, where's the proximity? Let's see. And, well, I guess we don't need the proximity, but just for fun, we'll just make this work here. So let me make this proximity 8 ticks. All right, so the proximity is working there. We can see the proximity. The two MAs are within the same proximity. All right, so now next means we need to look for price to be within the proximity. So essentially, we already have that done. I can take this solver here where I'm looking at the two MAs, make a copy of it, and I'll just change the indicator A to be the price, and let's see if 5 ticks will work for this here. And change my MA to the 50, which is the white line. Remember, the white line is the 50. And let me, so this one's turned white. Okay. Let me set this proximity to blue. And yeah, so I think that does it. Oops. All right, let me stretch the chart out here. That way we can see the white line and the blue line a little easier. And we shrink the stochastic. Okay, so here's our long signal. And let me bring BloodHound up here so we can kind of go through what's happening. All right, so we have 3 solvers that we're using here. And so we can see, so as price is coming down to the SMA, the white one, the 50, we're getting short signals. That's because the linear regression is short, right? So the linear regression is giving us a short output. And remember the proximity. So when the two MAs are close to each other, and when price gets within the proximity of the white SMA, remember the proximities are directionless, right? So if we look at the white plot here, the white line, right, we got a long and a short signal. So the only solver that is determining what direction the signal is in, whether the signal is short, is the linear regression slope. And since the linear regression slope is pointing down as price is coming down, that's why we're getting a short signal here. Because the other two solvers are directionless, right? They're giving us a long and a short. So let's use this 5-minute and see what happens. And oh, look at that. So if we turn on the 5-minute, let me give this a color here. I'll give it, give this one white, and let me change the color for this. I'll set this one to gray. Alright, so we have a lot of, see if you get too many colored plots on here, it gets a little difficult to read. But if I stretch the chart out, it kind of helps. Okay, so the white line now is this 5-minute filter. And unfortunately in this area, price just dipped below the 5-minute 50 EMA. So here, let me kind of force this to work. What happens if I go to 55? Nothing. All right, let's go to 100. guess we're just kind of in a bad spot right here to use this filter to filter this trade to go long. Well, shoot. Sorry, Ken. I was trying to filter this so that we only get a long signal. Let's see. Yeah. Great, Ken. You're saying wait till linear regression turns up. You know, we can see that we need some other kind of rule, some other kind of filter, so that we don't take a short here. Oh, how about, here we go. This will work. So I'm just going to move this solver up, and I'm going to compare price to the SMA 100. Change this to the SMA 100. Okay, there we go. So the red line is the SMA 100. So when price is above the SMA 100, we're only good for longs. And so since price is above, it kind of filtered out the short. And so there we go. Now here's our long signal. So right, so that's how you can use the linear regression as your filter to wait to go long. So I had to add a couple of filters in there. Right, so I wanted to make sure that price was above the 100 SMA, above the red line. We're looking, you know, realistically, this solver is probably not, well, yeah. I don't see much value in this solver here. Yeah, all right, so, oh wait, sorry, I had this labeled wrong. That's why it's good to keep your labels up to date. So we're looking at price to the 50 SMA proximity. Yeah, so this is a key solver. This linear regression is a key solver, so this one, we can turn this one off. All right. So our three key solvers for this this signal here, this setup, this system, right? We're looking for price to come back down, you know, to the 50 SMA, which is the white line. We want to make sure that price is above the red line to filter out the direction so we don't get short signals. And then we use the linear regression to determine the direction of the trade. So the linear regression and the price of the SMA 100, they both determine the direction of the trade. Right, so there is our long signal. And that's you know, you can see we need some other kind of filter here to make sure that we don't go short when we're above the SMA line, the 50. Interesting. It looks like you'd want to take a bounce trade off of this, but yeah, it went long and good for a couple of ticks. This short was good for a couple of ticks. This short was good for a couple of ticks. Yeah. I mean, you can see you need some more solvers for some filtering. However, I guess that's right. When you look at the linear regression, yeah, you can see, looking at the linear regression, it's pointing down. It's got a pretty good slope down. You know, so interesting. Linear regression is sloping up pretty good for a long trade. Yep. Interesting, Ken. So, all right, let me see if there's any other quick little questions, because really I need to wrap this up. It's after 12 o'clock. So, yeah, so Thomas is asking, could I also check whether the slope changes? Yeah, there's a solver here called the inflection solver. And so the inflection solver, you know, an inflection is the change in direction. So that particular solver will mark the change in direction. So if so let me put the 50 on there. Right, so we're looking at the white line, and let me turn off these other solvers. Right, so we can see when the 50 MA changed from sloping up to down, we got a red, you know, a short signal. And here we can see when the SMA start sloping back up, we got a long signal. So that's how you can detect the change in direction for any indicator. All right, let me try and get through a couple more questions before I wrap this up. Let's see, Ken, I think I already read this question. Base linear regression on period high and linear regression period low, depending on MA's pointing direction. Base linear regression on period high. Period on the period high or period low. I'm not sure what you mean by period. I'm thinking you probably mean, you're saying base linear regression on period high and linear regression period low. I'm assuming you mean like the high of the bar or the low of the bar, not the period. You know, when you say period, you know, I'm assuming you mean time period. So, as far as linear regression calculation, well, right. So I'm thinking you probably mean you want to base the linear regression on the bar high or the bar low. So if you wanted to do that, I'll show you quickly how to do some nesting. Right. So if we go to the linear regression slope, what I can do is, if you want to feed the low of the bar into the linear regression slope, we can go back to SI chameleon, right, and we can nest it. So nest it. Oh, wait. Oh, no, hold on. Shoot, we don't quite have that yet. Yeah, that's another feature that Jeremy's working on that should be out here shortly. In one of our next updates is, you know, you can see that when oh, hold on. Let me remove that and add the chameleon back on. So if I nest this in here, we can see the chameleon has all these different outputs. but right now they're not selectable. So Jeremy's working on being able to select whatever output you want. So you'd be able to select the bar low and be able to feed the bar low into your indicator. But that's not available quite yet. So what BloodHound does is it just takes the top plot, or the top value. So right now, with SI chameleon being nested into the linear regression slope, right now it's nesting the bar high into it. You can see the other ones are grayed out. So that's coming. It's not quite available yet, Ken. So maybe in the interim, you could recode you could modify the code of the linear regression slope indicator, to be able to select the bar high and the bar low for now. All right, let me try and get some of these other questions answered here. Right. Well, all right, it looks like that's it. It looks like the rest were just kind of comments to help coach me along understanding Ken's questions. So thanks, Ken. Thanks for your quick responses back to my questions. All right, guys. Yeah, this workshop's almost gone on for 2 hours, so we're going to wrap it up here. And I believe next week's webinar is, since I never did get to go through a summary of what each solver does. It's kind of how to use it and what it'll analyze. So I think I'll save that for next week's webinar. A summary of each solver, and also I know Jeremy's working on some improvements and some bug fixes, and so we might cover some of those too as well. All right, well, thank you guys. Thanks for hanging in there through all this, and we'll see you guys next week. All right, thanks guys. Jeremy, any last words?
No, just we're kind of testing out a I guess a interim release here, 105C we're calling it, just to fix some issues that we were seeing people have with SI Raven, namely an overfill issue as well as a crashing issue. So that's in the pipe, and we are just testing that right now. If any of you want to receive an early version of it before it hits the public, and you'd like to test it out, just be aware that that again we're just still testing it, because maybe say if you're having some problems with SI Raven, shoot me over an email, or just go to the contact section here at the support forums under our support. That's probably the easiest way actually, is just go to the support, contact us. And in fact, if you open up our main page, there's a little tab on the left-hand side of the screen that says support. So you can just go ahead and shoot us a message, and I can actually send you the pre-release version of it. So other than that, thanks for everybody for coming, and we'll see you guys next week.
All right, thanks guys. Bye-bye.